back to unapologetically outspoken. Okay, we have a countdown, and I swear, like it's always 2 seconds longer on my end than yours, I think. Because whenever I start, there's like a delay. So I don't know.
Yes. And I'm watching it. I watch it get to one, and then it's just like
I can tell
silence. And I'm
because you
like,
give me that look, and
wait a
it's still
minute.
on like two, one. And then I'm like, shoot, I messed it up again. Anyhow, happy Wednesday, everyone. Okay, you've been gone for a while. What's
Yes.
going on? How was your long weekend?
I went to Germany and it was awesome. And I went to this little medieval village. I guess it's not really a village, it's a city, but at one point it was a medieval town called Rothenburg. And I thought everything was going to be closed because Easter's like a big deal here where they shut things down from like Friday to Monday. But it was open and we had a great time and it was just really cool. It was a
That's
nice,
nice.
nice little trip. How was your Easter?
It was good. It was pretty uneventful. We did like all the Easter egg hunts and all that kind of stuff. So my kids had a blast. But yeah, my grandma, she's from Germany, and we were just talking about it because she was saying like, yeah, the church is here. Like, what are they doing? I mean, it's basically just this empty room. And in Germany, it was like these beautiful Gothic cathedrals in the mountains, and you're just surrounded by these stained glass windows. And she's like, you just don't get the same feel here. And I was like, yeah, because I remember going there and thinking, how the hell did they build this way back when before they had all the technology they have now? It's just incredible.
Yeah, and it's not just Germany, it's everywhere here. And that's why I keep saying like villages because they just like every town looks like it's a little village and every town was like constructed around
Hmm.
the church. And you can see the churches from miles away and they're just everywhere. And I was thinking the same thing as we were driving this weekend because I know I'm going to really miss that. Part of living here is just the incredible architecture. It is so
Yeah.
cool. Um, but I did want to make a comment for anyone who's watching instead of listening, because you'll notice I'm wearing my
Hmm.
glasses today because I I didn't give myself a black eye, but you know when you're sleeping and like your arm falls asleep because you're laying
Yeah.
on it funny? So that happened to me like 3 days ago, and it was the middle of the night, and I wanted to turn over, but I couldn't move my arm. So I used my other hand to like lift it over my face and I smacked myself in the eye and I cut
Oh
my
my God.
eyeball with my fingernail. Yeah. And my whole, like, I broke blood vessels in my eye and my whole eye was like
That
demon
is the
red.
most random thing I've ever heard. Like, oh yeah, no, I wasn't in a fight. I did this. My
Yeah.
arm fell asleep. I did this to myself.
Yes. It was me. So it is, I'm not wearing my contacts because I'm trying to let my eye heal. But if you look closely, you can tell it's just like
That's the
creepy
worst.
red.
I actually did something similar like a long time ago when I was a kid, and that is painful. I mean, anything with the eye, like
Mhm.
that is just it's horrible because you can't really do anything about it other than just wait for it to heal.
Exactly. But fortunately, the eye does heal itself fairly quickly. So it's definitely better than the horror show that it was a few
Oh
days ago.
man.
But I guess we should kind of dive into some of the stuff that's been going on because holy shit, it's been a very eventful few days. And before we get into things, so we aired a couple interviews on Friday and Monday. Hope you guys enjoyed those. I do want to comment on our Monday episode because I had a couple people point this out to me and then I listened to it myself and there was I don't know what's going on with our sound for that particular interview, but there was a major delay every time Dr. Carol was responding. And it's so awkward when you listen to it because we would ask a question and then it would be like 5, 6 seconds of nothing. And it wasn't like that when we recorded. So there was obviously some kind of sound
That's why
delay.
I think for interviews, we're gonna just stick with Zoom because it's like sometimes this fancy software It does that, and I that's happened to me in the past on other people's podcasts where there's more than two people on this platform. So I think it's something with like having multiple people. I don't know.
Yeah, so sorry, you guys, if that was distracting. We hope you enjoyed the interview anyway. So let's dive into what's been going on the last few days. First of all, the Pope died. And I guess on the bright side, he did hang in there until after Easter,
Yeah, he sure did.
right?
I mean, that was wild timing, but yeah, at least it didn't happen on Easter.
Yeah. Yeah. And then Klaus Schwab stepped down from the World Economic Forum over the weekend. And that, I think like right after the Pope died. And I guess he's about to turn 88. And he's been running the fucking World Economic Forum for 55
Yeah.
years, Stephanie. And good riddance. It is time to retire. And Erin and I were talking about this. And she asked me if I thought this like signaled the start of the collapse of like the global elite agenda. And honestly, my first thought was no, they're just going to replace him with someone else, probably someone even worse. But then I started thinking, like, I wonder if any of this has to do with Trump taking office and how he's exposing all of this corruption. And I don't know if we ever talked about this at the time, but there was an investigation at the World Economic Forum last year where employees were accusing Klaus Schwab and the organization as a whole of like discriminating against women and black people. And then according to a recent article in the Wall Street Journal, there's been some upheaval and like leadership changes taking place there. And of course, you know, their World Economic Forum is denying all of this. Klaus Schwab's denying it. But then the CEO, I don't even want to try to pronounce his name, Borga Brendi. Anyway, he put out a memo and he's stated that they're addressing leadership issues. So clearly something's going on. And then several of the other top executives left around the same time as Klaus Schwab, including the chief legal officer, the head of tech and digital services, and the managing director, who incidentally is his son, Oliver Schwab. And then his daughter, Nicole Schwab, also worked there and left back in December. So this makes me question, like, what's really going on if all the family members are leaving? Like, are they trying to distance themselves from something? Is a downfall imminent? And then I read this very interesting comment from Marjorie Taylor Greene on X on Monday, and she said, quote, "Today there were major shifts in global leadership. Evil is being defeated by the hand of God." And she posted this a few hours after the Vatican confirmed the Pope had died due to complications of a stroke and heart failure. And it was also after this announcement about Klaus Schwab stepping down. So, with your conspiracy brain, Stephanie, what do you think is going
I
on
could go
here?
so deep into conspiracy mode right now. I definitely believe that there is this war between good and evil. I know Tucker Carlson's talked about that before. And just if you look at cycles, like remember when I was talking about, like, okay, Trump keeps mentioning the golden age and it's the age of Aquarius. And there's these cycles that happen throughout history where events like good overcoming evil seem to take place. And I think that's true. And I think we're in this cycle where evil is starting to, go away, not go away, but good is like overcoming that. I think there's been a very long reign of evil. And with Klaus Schwab, I don't really know exactly what to make of it. I think it's probably a lot more than just a simple like discrimination lawsuit. He probably can see the writing on the wall. The world is changing like very rapidly with Trump in office. And my guess is he's trying to save his own ass now that their agenda has basically failed at the World Economic Forum. Like they slid under the radar for a long time, but now I think the general public is very aware of all of their dystopian plans. And I didn't realize Klaus Schwab created the World Economic Forum. Like he was the one who
Yes.
started it. And so for him to just step down and not pass the torch along to his children, who were very much involved in it, I think it speaks loudly that there is definitely some deep corruption conspiracy, whatever you want to call it. There's something going on there that we aren't going to know publicly. But I also don't think that Marjorie Taylor Greene was just talking about Klaus Schwab. I think she was also referring to the Pope. And I hate to say that because I don't want to disrespect anyone's beliefs or religion, but for those that have been down the rabbit hole of like the Vatican, I think that's what she meant. What do you think, Tara? Have you been down that rabbit hole yet?
We did a very brief little foray into the Vatican, I think like a year and a half ago. And that was the first time I'd ever really investigated anything about it. And I think we like barely scratched the surface
I
in
feel
that
like we need to
episode.
do a full episode, like a conspiracy episode where we deep dive. And maybe this will be a good time to do it because you'll have a new pope coming in and it's kind of like everyone's thinking about the Vatican. But I feel like lately I've just been seeing so many things on it, and I have for years, but there's a lot to unravel. And I think that could be an interesting episode. So she could be referring to like more of the conspiracy side of things, or she could have been referring to the fact that Pope Francis, I mean, he really was like the most, I guess, woke pope that we've had. He did all sorts of things that really directly defied traditional Catholic values. And he, sort of publicly injected the church into like left wing politics. And so there was just a lot of controversy there. So maybe that's what she meant. But overall, I do think we're going to keep seeing this shift of either evil or like these globalists falling or stepping in line and trying to get on like Trump's good side. And I do think it has to do with Trump getting in office. Absolutely. That's just my take.
Well, okay, we don't need to go into this now. Maybe I'll just save it. But have you heard of what's it called? The prophecy of the
Yes.
popes?
Oh my gosh. Okay, you have to like give at least a brief overview because I thought about talking about this, but then I was like, we could really go off into the weeds here. But now that you brought it up, people are going to want to know.
Yeah. Well, it's like this 800-year-old prophecy, and it's basically like after Pope Francis's death, he's like going to be the final pope before Judgment Day. And this like goes back to something that was written, I think, in the 1100s or something like that. And it's like we're at the end of the list of the popes before the apocalypse. So I guess that's like a
Yes.
big issue right now in the Catholic
And in the
Church.
Vatican, like they have these like ovals on the wall with like every pope that's ever been. And next to Francis, there's only one spot left. And then like Nostradamus had predicted at this point like a black pope would come in. So if they end up picking a black pope, then like these prophecies are unfolding, which is kind of crazy. But what made me feel better hearing this, because this is all over TikTok, I go to the comments section and so many people were saying that first of all, like in the Bible, it says no one, not even the angels, can predict Judgment Day. No one knows. But second, that it's not like Judgment Day or the apocalypse of the world. It's like their world, like this elite power structure will crumble and fall. And I'm more inclined to think that, especially once we get into all the conspiracy stuff in another episode. That's my whole thinking is that it's this elite power structure falling.
Okay, we definitely need to deep dive on
Like
this in a
side railed
different
for like
episode.
20 minutes on this, but it really is. I mean, it pulls you in because it goes deep. So everyone can look forward to that episode with the Catholic Church. Okay. Speaking of evil being defeated, a federal
Oh,
judge ruled that Google illegally monopolized the digital advertising market. And yes, I do think Google is freaking evil. And that's a whole other conspiracy that we'll get into another time, but I don't like them. And I guess the court determined that they exploited their control over like all of these advertising technologies that they have, including their publisher ad server and ad exchange systems, to basically dominate the online advertising industry and suppress the competition, which obviously. But this is the second major antitrust loss in less than a year for Google. And I'm quite honestly surprised. Like, I thought they would have bought and paid for like all these judges by now, but nope, they've got two lawsuits that they lost. So, following the rulings, the Department of Justice is pursuing remedies to address this. So, these are the proposals that are out so far: forcing Google to divest its Chrome browser, prohibiting exclusive agreements that set Google as the default search engine, requiring Google to share search data with competitors to level the playing field, or considering the sale of parts of Google's advertising technology business. And so obviously, Google has announced they're going to appeal these decisions, and it'll probably drag out for a long time in court. But they're saying that these measures would harm consumers and stifle innovation. I'm a consumer and I'm all for it. Like, break up Google. They have completely censored any sources on the right and have shaped this left wing narrative. And still to this day, they're doing it. And it's so blatant and in your face. So screw Google.
I don't even know why I'm still using Google. Like, what search
You
engine do you
can't use
frequent the
anything else
most?
because they, like, even if you try these other search engines, it defaults to Chrome. Like, they all go back to Google. So that's what they mean with that other court case, is they dominate the entire search engine industry.
I wonder how connected like DuckDuckGo is, because that's one that I really like, but I forget to use it sometimes because, again, Google is
I
always the
forget to use
default.
it too, and I feel like I've tried using it in the past, and it's, like, sometimes the results are just weird. So I don't know, but I mean, Google, I almost think they're worse now than they were a few years ago, because now I'll click on news on like a certain topic and there will be nothing, no search results whatsoever. And I'm like, that's not possible unless you're actively censoring stuff.
And see, I don't ever use Google to search for the news. I use specific news apps for everything. And so I know when we've talked in the past, when I look up something and you tell me like you can't find anything on it, I'm sure Google's fucking
Yeah.
censoring it. So yeah, I don't even use it for the news. I use it to just look up like nonsense and stuff for teaching and stuff like that. But since you brought up the antitrust lawsuits, we talked about that case that the FTC filed against Meta last week. Kind of the same thing, alleging that they're trying to create a monopoly when they purchased Instagram and WhatsApp. That trial is still ongoing and there's no resolution to it yet. But I guess court documents came up last week that basically showed there's just been a lot of drama going on internally with staff and all the steps that they were trying to take to make Facebook more relevant. And I read through several articles and I just really can't get myself to give a shit about any of it unless people end up being held accountable for all of the lies and the manipulation and the false narratives that they got away with for years and are still getting away with, Google and Meta. So I kind of feel like fuck them
Yeah, I
both.
agree. There needs to be accountability, but you're going to love this because I think there actually might be some accountability with at least one person, and that is Letitia James, the Attorney General of New York. So, just to recap, I think everyone knows this, but she's the one that went after Trump during the presidential campaign for supposedly overstating property values by billions of dollars to secure better financial deals. Okay, so she goes after him for that. Well, looks like she may have done the very same thing herself. So now she's facing a criminal referral from the Federal Housing Finance Agency to the Department of Justice, alleging potential mortgage fraud on not just one, but multiple properties. So she co signed a mortgage for her niece's home in Norfolk, Virginia. And a power of attorney form she signed included a statement indicating her intent to occupy the property as her principal residence, which it was not. Her loan application reportedly stated that she did not live there. So, in writing, you have that discrepancy. Pulte alleges the discrepancy was to secure a lower interest rate, as primary residences often qualify for better loan terms. Then she also purchased a townhouse in Brooklyn, which had a certificate of occupancy for 5 units. She allegedly listed it as a 4 unit property in mortgage and insurance documents to probably qualify for more favorable loan terms for that. And I guess if you put it as like 4 units instead of five, there's less requirements and all that kind of stuff. Then there's another one where her and her father allegedly signed mortgage documents stating that they were husband and wife to obtain a loan. I mean, you can't even make this shit up. It's so outlandish. And it's just hilarious because this is another instance where the left accuses the right of something they're actually doing.
Yeah, you know what's so funny? I was listening to this on Megan Kelly's podcast while we were driving over the weekend, and she was ripping into Letitia James. And all I could think was like, every fucking time a Democrat is crying about something Trump did, it's because it's something they've already done themselves. It's like the pot calling the kettle black to the extreme, right? And so I'm curious, she's denying it. I heard her give a statement yesterday where she's denying all of this. So I want to see the fucking receipts
Yeah, I mean,
and
if it's on these
see what comes of
documents,
this.
then you can't deny it. It's in black and
Yeah,
white.
exactly. And she better fucking be prosecuted if it is all true. So I guess we'll see what happens. But since we're talking about shady Democrats, and you know I'm obsessed with talking about Gavin Newsom, I have to bring up an update on him because he did an interview with The Hill on Monday. And he was talking about how, he's said this multiple times now. He's not sure where the Democrat Party stands anymore. But he said he was struggling with that because he's, quote, marginally part of the party. Marginally, okay? But he doesn't know what the party represents anymore or who's leading it or where it wants to go. And he was talking about the Bernie AOC rallies and how great they are because they meet the energy of the moment and it's what the people want. But then he turns around and says that, that energy on the progressive side of the party probably isn't going to translate into victory for the Democrats in 2028. And I swear, I'm going to die on this fucking hill because I have been talking about his political aspirations for the past 3 years on this podcast. I'm not going to say I was surprised he didn't run for president because of the whole Kamala bait and switch, but I still think he's going to run in 2028. And I think that everything he's been saying and doing with his podcast and all of his, recent, let's look into the problems in the Democrat Party. And now this like quote unquote marginal comment, like, no, he's definitely putting himself in the running.
I think so too. I think he'll run and I think AOC will run. And they are taking two completely different strategies because she's going even more to the left, continuing this like Trump is bad and we have to stop him. Which, funny side note, so her and Bernie are doing these rallies, which we know have people paid to show up, especially after our interview the other day. But anyhow, I went on the new like Chat GPT Sora thing where you can create videos, like AI videos, and it shows what's trending. And there's these videos that like people, it just shows what people are creating. The people are creating of AOC and Bernie at these rallies wearing like Nazi gear and like full on like acting like Hitler. And I just think it's hilarious because it's like, yes, like they're closer to that than anyone else. So I just think that's funny. And I don't think it's a winning message. But I also don't think that Newsom is going to get away with being this, like middle of the road, moderate guy when everyone knows he's not.
I can't remember which podcast it was. It might have been Megan Kelly because I just listened to like a slew of podcasts on our drive because we were in the car for 6.5 hours. But someone I listened to was talking about how, there is no clear candidate for the Democrat Party right now. and that they're not going to appear anytime soon. And they're going to just like let shit play out for the next couple years, but that they have someone in mind, but they're just not bringing it to the surface right now. And it's going to be someone who has this more moderate persona, at least on the surface. Because AOC is not, I mean, she's so fucking
Yeah.
extreme that she's going to get all the whack jobs, but she's not going to get the moderate Democrats, and they're going to present a candidate that will. So I think that's probably true, but I also still think that Newsom's going to throw his hat in
Yeah.
the ring.
I'm sure.
So I don't know. We have a few years to see what happens. I don't want to think about that yet. But on the topic of Democrats, there's a lot more drama going on because now they're calling once again for Pete Hegseth to resign. And there was another Signal chat report that this time that he shared sensitive like details of the Houthi related attack with his family. And this information is coming from a former Pentagon spokesperson named John Ulyat, who published an op-ed in Politico on Sunday. And in that he said that the Pentagon was in, quote, full-blown meltdown, and that they were overwhelmed by staff drama and turnover and dysfunction. And what's interesting is like this report comes on the heels of 3 former senior advisors to Hegseth that were fired last Friday in an investigation into leaked sensitive military plans. And they are all reportedly claiming that they still don't know what they're even being investigated for. And I want to dive into this a little bit because there's some shit going on behind the scenes. And it's very clear that the people on the inside, like there are people leaking classified and sensitive material to the press. And the question is who? And so one of the guys who was fired was Dan Caldwell. And I think he was like Hegseth's main advisor. And they've known each other for years. They've been friends for a long time. They used to work together. And he did an interview with Tucker on Tuesday where he talked about getting fired. And like throughout the interview, he didn't say anything negative about Trump or about Hegseth, like nothing that a scorned, former employee would have said or done. And he was adamant that he didn't leak anything. And so I want to play this clip from the show. And I just find this very interesting.
NBC News, for example. So I just want to be totally direct with you. Did you leak classified information against the wishes of your superiors to media outlets?
Absolutely not.
Did you photograph classified material and then text pictures of that material to an NBC News reporter?
Absolutely not. And I have not spoken to an NBC reporter while at the Pentagon.
Do you know what you've been accused of?
No, I don't. Sitting here right now, myself and Darren Selnick and Colin Carroll, the other 2 individuals that were escorted out of the Pentagon, initially placed on leave and then fired on Friday, we have not been told as of this recording, 1, is there what we were being investigated for? 2, is there still an investigation? And 3, was there even a real investigation? Because there's a lot of evidence that there is not a real investigation. But again, sitting here right now, there are a lot of unknowns about this. As a former Secretary of Defense would say, there's a lot of unknown unknowns. There are some things that are pretty clear, but we have no idea what specifically we're being investigated
for. We can know some things just by the details. So here are a couple. Have you been polygraphed?
No. I've never been hooked up to a polygraph machine since I've been in the Department of Defense.
Okay. Have you given up your private communications devices, your private phone, your phone?
No.
To anybody?
No.
Okay. So that raises the obvious question. I'm trying not to use the F word here because the lying is just driving me insane. You're being accused of leaking classified information, but the people accusing you would have no way of knowing whether you did that or not because they haven't polygraphed you or taken your devices, your private devices, correct?
I mean, there are...
You can't even make the allegation because there's no conceivable way you could prove that.
Let me just say, there are so many different things that would prevent me from doing the things that you've laid out. And again, I don't even know if that's what I'm really being investigated for, again, if there's a real investigation. But all of these, the point is so what I have told some people who have asked me about what's going on is I would repeat something that I heard in the Marine Corps in our work up to Iraq. I believe it was in something called a combat hunter course, it isn't what it sounds like. It's actually about observing things better. And I remember an instructor very clearly saying, when you're in this environment, believe nothing of what you hear and only half of what you say.
Okay, so he's very adamantly denying any kind of leaked information. But then yesterday, Hegseth, gives a press statement where he says that the leakers know exactly who they are and they know exactly what's going on, and that over time the truth will be told and all of the evidence is being gathered and it's going to be handed over to the DOJ and they're going to be prosecuted if necessary for what's found in the investigation. And then Megyn Kelly yesterday, she talked about this interview with Tucker on her show later in the day, and she had Steve Bannon on. And he was saying, because a lot of what they were talking about in the interview with Tucker was the war in Iraq and basically like how the neocons want us to get into another war in the Middle East, and that this guy Caldwell and the other two are very much against going to war, but then so is Trump. So it should, they should all be on the same page. But this interview Tucker did seems to be very controversial because it kind of defies the narrative about why these guys were fired. And Stephanie, I feel like there's more to this story. Like, especially because he was, had these ties with Hegseth. They worked together at some veterans association for like 8 or 9 years. He, again, said nothing negative about Hegseth or Trump. The story does not make sense to me so far.
I think there's probably a lot going on behind the scenes that we don't know about. But at the end of the day, like, does it actually matter if he leaked information or not? Like, if Hegseth can't trust him or Trump can't trust these people, then they should be able to fire them. I mean, you can't have people in on national security that you can't trust. And not this guy, but that other guy that wrote the political article, John Oliot, or however you say it, Don Jr. posted, "This guy is not America first. I've been hearing for years that he works his ass off to subvert my father's agenda. That ends today. He's officially exiled from our movement." It just seems like everyone on Team Trump is like completely calling BS on this whole thing that like, oh, Hegseth messed up again. And it's just a freaking narrative that they're running with. And I don't trust half the people that are in there. I mean, if someone's leaking information, and how can we say when we're not in there who it is and if it's true or not? We just don't know.
Right. And I agree with you there 100%. Clearly someone's leaking information, and the MSM is definitely pushing the narrative that Hegseth fucked up. And so, again, the Democrats are calling for him to be fired. Chuck Schumer comes out on Sunday and says, Trump's too weak to fire him. And, they're just like calling for heads to roll, right? But Trump made it very clear yesterday that he's standing by Hegseth. He did an interview where he's like, I don't know why people are still talking about this signal thing. Like, didn't we resolve that a couple weeks ago? And he's like standing by him. And then Caroline Leavitt also, she went out and gave a statement, and she made another statement last night, I think, but I want to play one that she gave on Monday.
I want to end with this. Front page of the New York Times, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth back in the news about staffers had to be dismissed, and a second signal chat that took place. Where's the president stand on this?
The president stands strongly behind Secretary Hegseth, who is doing a phenomenal job leading the Pentagon. And this is what happens when the entire Pentagon is working against you and working against the monumental change that you are trying to implement. Secretary Hegseth was nominated for this position because he is standing up for the war fighter, the men and women in uniform who are putting their lives on the line to protect our country and our homeland. And unfortunately, there have been people at that building who don't like the change the secretary is trying to bring, so they are leaking and they are lying to the mainstream media. We've seen this game played before. The secretary is doing a tremendous job, and the president stands strongly behind him.
Caroline, I also think it's important to break.
Okay, so I think the thing that's just like not bothering me but stuck in my head is that I always feel like Tucker does very compelling interviews. And I usually, like, he's always completely on the Trump side of things. Like, I don't even know if I'd call him impartial because I think he's actually very partial. And he is very much supportive of Trump's agenda and interviews people who are also supportive of that agenda. So I think this interview, it just kind of caught me because it kind of went against the norm.
Yeah.
You know what I'm
I
saying?
have to wonder if he's not like friends with this guy or something because he's lived in DC his whole life, for a lot of it. Maybe he knows this guy because it is kind of strange that he's doing an interview like that. And I think it's strange that Chuck Schumer is now saying that Trump is too weak to fire someone. It's like the other day you
Right.
were complaining he's firing too many people. Like everyone knows Trump's not too weak to fire someone. He fires a lot of people. It's just so asinine. But the reason why I'm going to call BS on this whole thing is because this is the exact same narrative they tried pulling with Elon Musk, which was a complete lie. Like, oh, Elon's screwing up and now Trump needs to fire him. And behind the scenes, they're not getting along. Like, they're taking the same exact game plan and now just trying to apply it to Pete Hegseth because it didn't work with Elon. And I can't take anything they say seriously at this point.
No, and on top of that, they have wanted Hegseth
Yeah.
out from day one. Like they didn't want him there in the first place. So I think there is always going to be an agenda to get Hegseth out of
Right. And
that
you got to
role.
think just because he's in there doesn't mean like there's not tons of people that were running this like woke narrative for the past 4 years that are still in the Pentagon. So those people, of course, they're going to try to
Yeah.
subvert his agenda. And I mean, I just think we're going to see a lot of this. And when it doesn't work with Pete Hegseth, then they'll move on to like, oh, now it's RFK and they're fighting. And we're going to see this play out with everyone in his cabinet.
Yes, but that's where I'm wondering, is this a subversion tactic to undermine like Hegseth's closest
Yeah.
advisors? Like maybe it wasn't them that did the leak, but maybe it's, the people in the Pentagon that are the actual leakers that are basically trying to get these
Oh,
people out
for
of the
sure. I
way.
think there's people that were fired that are bitter and leaking stuff. But also, I disagree with what Tucker said. Like, okay, so they didn't do a polygraph test and they didn't look at your phone. How could they know that you leaked it? Well, I can tell you how. They gave him information and he was the only one they gave certain information to, and that information was leaked. I mean, that's how they do. I mean, it's has anyone ever watched a movie like on the CIA? Like that's how they do it. They weed out the mole by giving everyone different information and they see what information comes out. Hello, Tucker, come on. But I don't know. It's I feel like I'm so desensitized to it that when I hear this stuff, I'm just like, we'll just see how it plays out because I don't believe anything anymore. It's bad.
I know.
Well, it's not bad, but we just have to use discernment, I guess. But okay, speaking of BS narratives, I happened to come across a new website that the Trump administration created called covid.gov, and it basically takes you through every narrative that was fed to us by Fauci and the MSM over the last 4 years, 5 years now, and completely dismantles it. So I think this is a big deal because this isn't some fringe website. Like, this is our government publishing the truth and exposing all of the lies that were told and the people and the organizations that were involved in those lies, full well knowing they were lies. And so it goes over everything from the origin of COVID to gain of function research to the failures of the NIH, EcoHealth, and HHS. It calls out Fauci, obviously, but also Cuomo and Dr. Morenz. It calls out the real misinformation, which was that masks and social distancing worked when we all know it didn't, and they knew that when they recommended it. And so, looking at this, I don't know, Tara, like I had to think, is this a preview of what will hopefully be accountability and charges brought to these corrupt people like Fauci? And if I had to guess, like I would bet that Trump is waiting until the tariffs are set up and manufacturing shifts away from China and we get all that squared away so that we're no longer reliant on China, and then maybe pursuing or having the DOJ pursue COVID and the fact that it came from the Wuhan lab in China that was doing this gain of function research, which was funded by organizations that Fauci signed off on.
I think that's one of the biggest things that I'm hoping for with this administration is some fucking accountability for all of the criminal activity that was perpetuated on the American people by fucking Fauci and the Biden admin. And since you brought up COVID, I want to bring up something I just read again about Fauci from one of my absolute favorite government watchdog agencies, Open the Books. So they just revealed a new report showing how Fauci profited millions off of this COVID narrative during lockdown while everyone else was suffering. And listen to how much money this man has, right? So before the pandemic, Fauci's net worth was 7.6 million,
As
which
a
to me
government
is still
employee.
crazy for, I was going to say, for a public servant, right? It surged to 15 million by the end of 2023, and he earned more than 3.5 million alone during his first year of retirement. How strange. So the CEO of Open the Books, John Hart, he put out a statement saying, quote, Dr. Fauci's assets soared during the worst of the draconian COVID lockdowns while families and small businesses struggled through school closures and lost income. Now it's clear the cash kept coming in during his first year of quote unquote retirement. He was rubbing elbows with groups like America's health insurance plans flanked by taxpayer funded security, even as his wife remained the top bioethicist at the NIH. End quote. Which, incidentally, as a side note, his taxpayer-funded security that he referenced in that, it was U.S. Marshals protection, which I think we've talked about this before, that Trump terminated for Fauci recently, fortunately. But Stephanie, between January of 2023 and September of 2024, Fauci's security cost American taxpayers $15 million. 15 million
Oh
fucking
my
dollars.
God.
Yeah. Yeah, and he reportedly also earned the highest salary of any government bureaucrat before he retired. He was earning almost $500,000 a year, again, working in public service. But where did the rest of the money come from, right? With these millions of dollars? I know he wrote a book, and I think he sold that book deal for a few million. But financial disclosures show that he also pocketed multiple six-figure payments in 2023 that totaled 1.5 million. And those disclosures don't explain why or like from whom he received these funds. But what we do know is that this was conveniently around the same time that he was giving speeches to the National Association of Chain Drug Stores and the American Health Insurance Plans. So I'm sure there was nothing shady going on
This
there,
is
right?
just crazy that the guy who basically, put the whole country under massive lockdowns that affected every single American citizen doesn't have to explain why or how he received millions of dollars. Like that, I'm sorry, are you
Right.
kidding me? That should be a basic thing that every government employee has to do to prevent corruption. I mean, it's absolutely crazy the stuff that they've been getting away with. But, the same question, is there going to be any accountability? Because it's pretty blatant. And I
Right.
know people are getting impatient, and I am too, but I've just been stewing on this a lot over the last week or so. And I kind of feel like Trump's getting all of his ducks in a row. Like, let's get our economy booming, get everything going really good, get rid of income tax, and then do this. Because the first criminal charge that's put forth, the media is going to go crazy and they're going to start calling him Hitler and all this kind of stuff. So I think he
Yeah.
wants to make sure like Americans are doing good, we're happy, like his agenda's working. and then maybe he'll go after these people, hopefully. But I mean, with our judicial system, I don't hold out a lot of hope, and that's pretty sad, especially with all these federal
No.
judges.
Yeah.
But I do have some good news. Okay, I'm shocked this is happening finally. But Florida just banned chemtrails and weather modification. But I mean, Tara,
Awesome.
though, how can they ban something that's just a conspiracy? That's weird. And it's for anyone that doesn't know, we almost had our TikTok account banned, like completely shut down for posting about chemtrails because that was, according to TikTok, a quote unquote conspiracy. Yet the Florida Senate just passed SB 56. And so this bill prohibits the intentional release of chemicals or substances into the atmosphere to alter weather or climate conditions, which there you go. I guess that confirms that chemtrails and geoengineering are real. And so the bill now makes it illegal to inject, release, or disperse any chemical, compound, substance, or apparatus into Florida's atmosphere with the intent to affect temperature, weather, climate, or sunlight intensity. And I guess violators will or could face a third degree felony, punishable by up to 5 years in prison and up to $100,000 in fines. Aircraft operators and controllers involved can be fined up to $5,000. And Governor Ron DeSantis has been vocal about this. He expressed support for the bill, stating that Florida will not engage in geoengineering practices aimed at altering the climate. And he criticized these initiatives as kooky ideas and emphasized that the state is not interested in participating in experiments to block sunlight or modify weather patterns. So this got me thinking, remember last year when Hurricane Helene and Milton hit? And I told you how on the radar it was showing planes circling inside of the hurricanes for like 6 hours straight. And then after that, the hurricanes drastically changed their path and became way more intense. I have to wonder if that's what he's alluding to and if that's why all of a sudden, finally, the Senate and the government decides to come out and publicly say, yeah, this is happening and we're passing legislation to ban it. Like, it makes me think if they're going to do that and they're going to confirm this is real, it's not just a conspiracy, and they're going to put like all of these measures in place, there has to be a good reason for doing so. And maybe it was those hurricanes.
It's possible. I think you should do an experiment. I think you should like talk about this bill on TikTok and just use use the term, use all the terms that we're not supposed to, like weather modification and chemtrails, and use the actual terminology from this bill and see if our account gets
Yeah,
flagged
well,
again.
that'll be the nail in the coffin if it does. But I mean, might as well go out with something we're passionate about.
My God. Well, that's awesome. And I'm glad to hear that. And I think they need to do that everywhere. And on the topic of banning things, I'm going to bring up another positive story, and that is that RFK Jr. just did a press conference yesterday with Food and Drug Commissioner Dr. Marty Makary and then NIH Director Jay Bhattacharya. And they announced that they're getting rid of 8 different artificial food dyes. This will include yellow 5 and 6, red 40, blue 1 and 2, and green 3, all of which are used very heavily in the food industry in the US. And RFK Jr. said these dyes are going to be phased out of our foods by the end of the year, which I thought was very interesting because that's, less than 9 months away. And that's a lot of work to be done. So I guess realistically, this shouldn't be a big problem because we've talked about this many times, how these poisons aren't even allowed in Europe. So the companies, they all know how to make these foods without using these artificial dyes. They can use natural dyes like they do here. They use a lot of like beet juice and carrot juice, I think watermelon juice, mostly juices instead of these artificial dyes. And I guess the FDA is also trying to fast track some natural dye alternatives that include butterfly pea flower extract, calcium phosphate, Gladaria extract. I don't know if that's a flower, and gardenia. And I'm not familiar with most of these, but I think if they're at least a natural alternative to these toxic fake dyes, I'm in favor of trying it. And I think what's crazy is when you really consider the amount of this toxic shit that's in our food, and we talk about our food a lot, but I think a lot of people still think that these dyes are only used in candy and sugar cereals and junk foods, but they are in literally thousands of products in America, including a lot of healthy foods. And just for an example, like yellow 5 is used in chicken bouillon, in pancake mix, in pickles. Companies even use red number 2 to color the skins of oranges to make them look more appealing. So, yeah, we need to get rid of this shit. And something that I think is very positive is in addition to like what's taking place with RFK Jr. on a federal level, already this year in 2025, more than half of the 50 states have introduced similar bills to get rid of toxic synthetic food dyes in their states. So I think that's awesome. And the one thing I couldn't get from most of the articles I read was I didn't see any clear like regulations on how this was going to be enforced. And I guess it's not an all-out ban. And the way RFK Jr. was talking about this plan, he said like there's an understanding with the food industry. So I don't really know how that's all going to play out. I don't think any specific regulatory plans have been released. But if he can pull this off by the end of the year, then that's great.
I sure hope so, because originally these food companies were trying to say, oh, we need 5 years to reformulate, which is ridiculous, because if they're making it for Europe, they don't need 5 years. They already have, the formula. But this is great. I mean, it's something that's super concerning. I saw Megyn Kelly talking to someone in the government, and she made a great point. She's like, so I baked a cake for my daughter's birthday and basically gave her cancer because it had all these different dyes. And I was like, damn, like point well made.
Yeah.
So I think it's great. We need to get it out of everything. And yeah, like you said, it's in stuff you would never guess that you would think is healthy and completely fine. More good news on the economy is Hyundai just announced a $5.8 billion investment in American steel manufacturing. And this brings their total investment in the US to $21 billion. And then there's several pharmaceutical companies that are also investing billions in US manufacturing, which is needed because, as we've said many times on this show, we're totally dependent on China for like our basic prescription medications. And so hopefully we can start making those here. And then the total now, it's over $3 trillion in private sector investments in the US that have been announced so far. And I think that's pretty damn good considering we're 4 months into the Trump administration.
Yeah, and I've been reading several articles talking about how, there's a lot of these major money companies in Europe that are considering moving and investing into the United States because of the way that, Europe's not playing well with Trump and this whole tariff game. So I'm curious to see if we get any big players from Europe coming in as well. But I do have some sad news, Stephanie. And this is sad only for all the people who thought that they were going to shirk their responsibility of paying back their student loans after you were sadly mind-fucked by Biden for the last few years. So Education Secretary Linda McMahon made an announcement on Monday, and she said the government is going to start recouping loan payments. And there's so much backlash on this, and I have to read what she wrote, and it's kind of long, but you have to hear the whole thing. So she said, President Biden never had the authority to forgive student loans across the board, as the Supreme Court held in 2023. But for political gain, he dangled the carrot of loan forgiveness in front of young voters, among other things, by keeping in place a temporary COVID area deferment program. COVID era, not area. Thus, the education department allowed students to rack up a massive debt that is now long past due. Between 2021 and 2024, federal student loan debt increased by more than $60 billion a year, while the department manipulated repayment plans and forgiveness policies until only 38% of the student loan portfolio was in repayment. This is unsustainable for both students and taxpayers. I am announcing the end of this dishonest and irresponsible policy. We will conform the department's repayment options to federal court decisions and end the Biden-era practice of zero interest, zero accountability forbearances that are pushing borrowers into loan delinquency and default. On May 5th, we will begin the process of moving roughly 1.8 million borrowers into repayment plans and restart collection of loans in default. Borrowers who don't make payments on time will see their credit scores go down, and in some cases, their wages automatically garnished. Why? Not because we want to be unkind to student borrowers. Borrowing money and failing to pay it back isn't a victimless offense. Debt doesn't just go away. It gets transferred to others. If borrowers don't pay their debts to the government, taxpayers do. Student loans must always be paid back because they're unlike other types of consumer loans. If a borrower stops paying a mortgage or car payment, he will go into foreclosure or find his car repossessed. Student loans have no collateral. It's impossible to repossess a college degree. That's why they are very rarely discharged, even in bankruptcy. That's the hard truth for borrowers. But I have another hard truth for the institutions that made empty promises to students while pocketing their loan dollars. Colleges and universities call themselves nonprofits, but for years they have profited massively off the federal subsidy of loans, hiking tuition and piling up multi-billion-dollar endowments while students graduate six figures in the red. A widely cited 2015 study found that for every dollar of increased federal caps on subsidized loans, colleges raised tuition by 60 cents. Many of the degree-granting programs that qualify for student loans are worthless on the job market, but colleges continue to accept students to these programs and encourage them to borrow to pay for them. Accountability is a two-way street. As we push to hold student borrowers to account, we will push colleges to be responsible and transparent. If you are a student borrower with a federal loan balance and haven't been making payments, you must start repayments now. Our federal student aid office is providing every form of assistance we legally can to ensure that a monthly payment can fit into your budget. And then she talks about other strategies, et cetera, et cetera. But wow.
Well, and I think she's right to bring up these universities. Like, that's the real bad guy. Look at how much they've increased tuition since student loans became a thing. And if you look at debt in America, it has drastically gone up ever since student loans became a thing because they're selling young people this false promise that, yeah, you get a degree and you're going to be golden. And now we know that's not the case, especially with, like a liberal arts degree or something. But yeah, I mean, you can't expect other people to pay your debt that either didn't go to college or paid off their debt. Why should we be responsible for that? And I'm sorry, but like if they're going to go and criminally prosecute Trump for lying on a loan document, even though he fully paid back the loan, then everyone should be held accountable to paying back their loans. Like this is just basic finance. And it's really sad that there's a lot of people out there that were just given terrible advice. Like,
Yeah.
don't pay it because Biden's going to save you. Like, be mad at Biden because he obviously didn't make it happen.
Yeah, and for those of you who do have a useless degree, I get it because I have 3 useless degrees and I don't use any of them. And one of them is a master's degree and 2 bachelor's degrees. So I feel you if you ended up with a degree that has nothing to do with your job. But guess what? I paid back all my fucking loans and you all need to do the same. So I think the thing that the media was an uproar about the most was, oh my God, they're going to garnish people's wages and, hold them accountable. And it's like, but that's what you would do with any other loan, right?
Exactly.
I mean,
Yeah.
like,
Not to
anyway, I mean,
mention
that's what
there's a
you would
lot
do
of
at least
people that got loans and didn't even go to college. Like they got student
Mhm.
loans and just partied
Yeah.
with them or whatever. So I mean,
Yes.
you signed it, you actively went and said you were going to pay it back. You got to pay it back.
And I do think the thing with holding the colleges and universities accountable is something that we really need to be focused on because I did not make notes on this. I don't remember the percentage, but I just recently read an article and it was an alarming percentage of students who graduated with degrees that are not applicable to the job field, like just in the last few years, because of so many advancements, especially with AI, that people are graduating with degrees that just aren't even relevant,
Yep.
4 years later. So I think the whole education system needs to be overhauled. And since we're on the topic of education, I want to point out that as predicted, Harvard did indeed file a lawsuit against the Trump administration on Monday, and this was after he froze the 2.2 billion in grants when the school refused to comply with federal law. But now there are over 150 colleges, including Ivy League schools like Princeton and Yale and Duke and Rutgers, and they've all signed an open letter opposing the Trump administration's what they're calling, quote, unprecedented government overreach, end quote. So now they're all taking a collective stand against what they're calling a strategy designed to overwhelm campus leaders with a constant barrage of directives, executive orders, and policy announcements. And I'm like, you know what? Good. Keep fucking whining. Like all of these schools, all of you. You're all part of the corruption that needs to be weeded out and abolished.
Yeah, and I bet that most Americans had no clue that their taxpayer dollars were going to Ivy League schools that have the highest tuition rates in the country. Like I didn't know that until recently. I mean, why are they charging, $80,000 a year if they need federal funding? Like it just doesn't make sense to me. And I'm sorry, but aren't these the same schools that have been preaching about white privilege for the last 4 years? These are the most privileged schools with the most privileged staff and students. And so they're so privileged that they don't think they have to comply with federal law. I mean, it just sounds like a bunch of rich, bratty kids to me, and I don't feel sorry for them one bit. Sorry.
No, no, not at all. And it's like we said last week. If you want to qualify for federal funds, then follow fucking
Yeah.
federal law.
Yep.
And if you don't, then spend your own damn money.
Exactly. Because you have plenty of it. You've got a huge endowment you're sitting on. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Okay, totally switching gears. We have to end with a new conspiracy that's emerging all over social media. Okay. Remember last week when I played the clip of Trump saying that we have the most powerful weapons that like no one even knows about? I'm just paraphrasing. Well, I'm going to play another clip now from his science director and listen to what he said in a press conference last week.
Your planes are slower than they used to be. Our trains crawl compared to those in other parts of the world. Our cars do not fly. Advances have not stopped, but something has gone wrong. Stagnation was a choice. We have weighed down our builders and innovators. The well-intentioned regulatory regime of the 1970s became an ever-tightening ratchet, first hampering America's ability to become a net energy exporter and then making it harder and harder to build. We seem to have lost focus and vision, to have lowered our sights and let systems and structures and bureaucracies muddle us along. But we are capable of so much more. Our technologies permit us to manipulate time and space. They leave distance annihilated, cause things to grow and improve productivity.
Okay, so we have technology that can bend space and time? What? And I want to point out that this was a prepared speech that was published on the White House website. This wasn't just some random, like off the cuff comment. Like he prepared to go out and talk about this. And since then, as far as I know, no one has come out and clarified or walked back that statement. But last week, Trump did post this on Truth Social. He said, quote, the best definition of intelligence is the ability to predict the future. Now, he gave no context. He just posted that. So, like, was he hinting at something? And I could not find the clip anywhere, but he said something similar in one of the Oval Office meetings where he was like, you have to be able to see into the future. And so that happens, right? Then, like, right after that all happens, Northrop Grumman, their rocket research ranch, had a massive explosion, destroying one of its buildings and everything in it. And they're like one of these big, private contractors. Is that just a coincidence that this major private contractor of the tech that the director of science was just talking about has a massive explosion destroying an entire building that probably had who knows what inside of it? And so this had the internet in a frenzy, speculating like, what could this mean? And why did they decide to make those specific comments publicly? Like, are they going to start disclosing these black ops projects? Is this the big thing they said Elon uncovered that they'd be sharing? And a lot of people are saying, no, 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 they're alluding to time travel when they say bending space and time, because that's essentially like how time travel could be possible. And so that made me think about that book. And I think I told you about this a long time ago, Tara. It was called Adventures of Baron Trump. And it was written in 1889. And it's about this little boy named Baron Trump who time traveled in tunnels underground. And it talks about this rich man named Don becoming president. And he lived on Fifth Avenue in New York. And like people protested. And it was a whole thing that started this conspiracy a few years ago that like the Trumps could time travel. So then I go from that, stick with me, to what we said last week, where we were talking about Trump's uncle, John Trump, who was the sole man that had access to Nikola Tesla's apartment to view all of his research. And Nikola Tesla was always talking about time travel. Was there something in there? Like, do they have this tech? And then on top of that, remember Trump announced this big new AI tech project and they decided to call it Stargate. And back then I was like, why did they name it Stargate? Because Stargate, not only is it known fictionally as a portal where you can have instantaneous travel from one point to another, but Project Stargate was also a CIA remote viewing program where they tried to physically predict future events or psychically predict future events. So, like, there's just all of these references to time travel type things. And my conspiracy brain is going crazy over this. So, you got to give me your opinion. Do you think this science director decided to publicly talk about technology they have to bend space and time because he's alluding to something, or did he just slip up and he was just referring to like something that's not that big of a deal?
Okay, first of all, we have to find this book. Have you actually read this?
I have it. Yes.
Book? You
When
do?
you get back in the US, I'll send it to you.
Okay, and it was actually written in the 1800s.
Yes, Ingersoll Lockwood. It's a whole thing. Like, so many people are talking about this because there are multiple things in there that, I mean, it's like they predicted the future, and it was written in the 1800s. It's been confirmed.
Holy crap. Okay, I got to read this.
Yeah.
Wow, there's a lot to unpack here. This is pretty crazy. And like, I just don't think anything is out of reach anymore, right? After everything we've talked about on this podcast for the last 3 years, I feel like I am open to all the conspiracy theories, right? And in that clip, he, what's his name? Kratsios, the science director, he talked about how our levels of innovation have slowed since the 1970s due to the regulatory system. But my question is, have they really? Like, did they really slow? Because I think a lot of shit has been going on behind closed doors. And then ever since that Tesla connection like clicked for me last week, I honestly believe that Tesla's inventions have a lot to do with hidden technology and all the shit that Trump has been hinting at since he took office. And, this guy also made comments about how we have to shift from reliance on cheap labor and immigration to technologies in America that enhance our own production. And he said this is our opportunity to re enter an era of bold invention. And when you think about it, like, that totally ties into Trump's national security plans, his immigration plan, his tech plans, the whole America First agenda. Like, it's all related. And I I really think there's some crazy shit in the works that has the potential to be totally mind-blowing. And to be honest, I think that time travel already exists and it's just been kept a secret. And I guarantee there's some fucking classified CIA files somewhere about how we've already been doing this.
I 100% agree. And I think, when you talk about the Pentagon losing trillions of dollars like multiple times, where is that going? It has to be
Right.
something big, so it's just interesting. And I mean, this is like all over social media and no one's really addressed it. Like if it was a misstep, you would think someone would just come out and be like, "You guys, he didn't mean time travel." But I feel like they're giving us a carrot. Like they're trying to say something big is coming.
Yeah.
I don't know. We'll see.
Ooh, it
So
is.
that'll give everyone something to think about. I'd love to hear everyone's thoughts on that. But man, that's a lot that has happened over the last few days. And I'm sure there's going to
Yeah.
be a lot more between now and Friday. So everyone enjoy the rest of your week. And we'll see you back here on Friday. Thanks for tuning in.